Hey everybody, my name is Jeffrey Zeger, and I want to thank both Julie and Stephen for asking me to do this presentation, Children and Computer Gaming Addictions. I've done this presentation before with NASW and Family Advocacy Network, and I appreciate once again having the opportunity to present this. I fully support Josh's Hope Foundation. It's a great program, and it's been helping hundreds of people. So once again, thank you, Julie, and thank you, Stephen. And let's get right into it. As you guys know, if you have kids or younger adults or even adults, video games can be very addictive. It could preoccupy people, take up a lot of time. And through this presentation, we will be talking about what makes addiction, what is it about video games that can become so compelling. I like how that's used by some video game programmers. They say it's compelling as opposed to addictive. And as you probably have experienced, when kids or even adults or young adults are not doing well on their games, they can become angry. I don't know if you've ever had this experience of hearing someone shout from the other room when they don't win a game, and it can be rather disruptive. So all of those pictures that I just showed are different types of video games. There's several different genres: first-person shooter, massive multiplayer online first-person shooter, going down a little bit, role-playing games. There's an entire culture that comes with playing video games. Have you ever heard of PvP or PvC? PvP means player versus player. PvC means player versus computer. So if you are into playing video games, you will learn the culture and all of the sub-genres and the words that come with this culture. It's a huge business. This is an old stat. I'll probably have to update it at some point, but the worldwide video game marketplace, which includes both the game consoles, the hardware, the software, and even all of the t-shirts that come with it, and the little dolls, the action figures representing the characters in the video games, can be upwards of $93 billion. And it was estimated back in 2015 that it would go up even more. So at some point I will update this statistic. But the point of this is it is a huge business. So some of the statistics that are out there include that somewhere between 8 and 12% of all United States children can have problems related to playing video games. And those problems can be emotional, social, academic, behavioral, as well as lying, starting to have some moral failties. I would suspect that if you have children and you have tried to get them off of their video game, there may have been a tantrum, or if they wanted to have extended time, they would have a tantrum, and that becomes very disruptive to the house. Average child will spend somewhere around 2,000 hours in front of the screen between their 10th and 11th birthdays. Wow. I'm going to show my age, but when I was a kid, we did not have the internet or video games. I remember it was later on that Atari actually became part of our household. But before that, I'd go outside and play kick the can or ride my bike or climb a tree. So it is a new pastime. It is an entertaining default that a lot of children have. When they're done with, even if it's not problematic, it could become concerning for parents, because after they do their chores and their homework, the default can be, for many kids, going on screens. And then the parents become concerned about, why are you spending so much time doing screens in your room alone? Why aren't you going and doing soccer or karate, going to your friend's house? So even if it's not directly intrusive as problematic, it could be concerning as the default. On the bottom, it says nearly 23% of youth report that they feel addicted to video games, and 31% of that is males, 13% are females. Some of the other screen high use activities for females can be texting, Snapchatting, and we'll get to that later, that there's other forms of electronic overuse and addiction. We'll break that down later on. The China Communist Youth League claimed that in 2007, 17% of Chinese citizens between 13 and 17 were addicted. There's a YouTube video out there about a rehab in China for people who are addicted to video games. And the rehab is not like the rehabs we have over here. It looks much more like a boot camp. So if you want to search for that, feel free to do that. There were also some policy changes that in South Korea were made, and the policy changes included no children under the age of 16 would have access to video games. I forget when that was implemented, but it showed that the government was becoming aware that something had to be done. In some of the countries over there in Asia, whether it's Korea or China or Japan, they would have these internet cafes 24 hours a day where someone could go and pay to have a seat on a screen, and they would just play, and they would spend all of their money playing video games at these internet cafes and do a lot of Red Bull and stay up late with all of the caffeine. So in the worst case scenarios, these are the outliers. These are not necessarily the norm, but just to see the extreme of where things have gone. One person stabbed a friend to death when he found out that they had stolen a virtual sword. That's one of those cultural phenomenons. Virtual sword is something that is imbued with special skills and special powers. It's very, very rare. And so to find it is like, I found it. So in 2009, an Ohio court sentenced 17-year-old Daniel Petrick to 23 years in prison for the fatal shooting of his mother because they took away Halo 3. You could read over these as, you could read over these for right now. But here's South Korea after a 50-hour StarCraft session. The South Korean man collapsed. It's another pitfall, is that people can stay on for hours and hours and hours and not eat and not sleep. I've even had some kids who talk about when they're playing for so long and they're so engrossed, they get what they call the shakes. And the shakes are when the adrenaline is kicking in, and that causes some shaking in the hand. So we'll cover some of the pitfalls and some of the actual physical problems later. Oh, one more thing. With some of the younger kids that I work with, I've even had some parents say that when the kid is playing for so long, they delay going to the bathroom to the point where they wet themselves. I don't know if any of you have ever had that, but it has happened. That's once again an indication of some of the extremes that can happen when someone is completely engrossed in video games. So what contributes to video game addiction? Let's talk about games itself, because kind of like cigarettes, which have additives to get the nicotine into the system faster, video games have some things that are wired in, programmed in to make them very compelling. We're going to go back to behaviorism. It's one of the first things in my training that I was introduced to, and it's still a good standby for me. Behavior can be trained and modified. If you actually look at any of the therapy types, they can fall into one of two categories. One is called outside in, the other is called inside out. Inside out is where someone goes in, they talk about their feelings, they feel better, they process through whatever internal distress is, and then their behavior changes. Outside in is you just set up the structure and have the person repetitively do what has been determined to be therapeutic for them, and eventually by doing it repetitively, they start to feel better about themselves. So Behaviorism is more the outside in. And you remember Pavlov's dog. At first, the dog would eat food and salivate, and then Pavlov would ring a bell and associate it with the food. And then when just ringing the bell, the dog would salivate. So the association through the behaviorism resulted in the dog salivating just when the bell rang and not when the food was presented. And then, of course, there's B.F. Skinner, what is classically known as the Skinner box. And he did a lot of experiments with rats by giving them reinforcement in the form of food pellets. And he found that there's different ways to reinforce the behavior that you want. One is called the fixed ratio schedule. One is called the variable ratio schedule, fixed interval schedule, variable interval schedule. And feel free to pause this presentation if you want to look at the details of what makes one schedule different from another. I don't want to take too much time here, but we're going to look at a video of a psychologist who works for Epic Games, and he is talking to a room full of other video game programmers and telling them about these different types of schedules that B.F. Skinner came up with and how you can wire them into the game to make the game fun and compelling and not boring. So let me get my...
So if we look at all of these, it can be tempting for game developers to just go, oh, well, the variable ratio is the best, right? It's the highest, it's the most constant, so we should just make everything random, everything variable, and that's the best approach to take. Actually, the best approach is to combine these schedules together, make sure that there's always a little bit of certainty there for players, so fixed intervals or fixed ratio things. People like to know that a certain amount of behaviors will be rewarded, and the variable ones they can lay on top of that for the random rewards, the random loot, the things that people find quite compelling. And moving on with this in terms of feedback, we also have to consider when rewards are given. In terms of timing, if you want to reward people for success or progress or making a choice, feedback and reward on that should be basically immediate. It needs to be coupled with the reward. Otherwise, people are quite bad at learning to say, I say something funny and then 10 minutes later you laugh. That's not going to reward me. It's not make me feel good that my joke landed. I'm just probably going to get confused. And if you do want systems that take a long time to reward the player, like leveling up, for example, and again, then you need strong feedback support, right? Leveling up in an RPG is really rewarding. You get a bunch of stuff, but we use XP bars as little chunks of feedback, little bits of reward as you move towards that bigger one to keep people motivated, to keep people aware of what's going on. The other idea is uncertainty or unexpected rewards. Now, unexpected rewards are quite motivating. There's quite a lot of research that says that if you can deliver rewards unexpectedly to people, they find them compelling and motivating. One example of this could be in puzzle games, where people are able to come up with a suggestion or a solution within the puzzle game that they feel like came out of nowhere or was random. They can feel very rewarding to people.
Okay.
So if we look at all...
And there's my funny for the PowerPoint. The rat will press lever for food. Looks like he's out of a job, poor rat. So what did you guys think of that video? That is a psychology PhD, a doctorate in psychology, who is working for the video game Epic and presenting information about how to make video games more compelling. I love the word that he used, compelling. We could also substitute that with the word addictive. Another interesting piece with behaviorism is the reinforcing as close to the event as possible. He mentioned that you want to have the timing directly related, so that way someone learns, oh, the bell goes off and I salivate. So we also do this with this type of pairing things close together with behavioral structures in the household. So for example, it's not a good idea if Johnny did not do his chores 3 days later to say, oh, because you didn't do your chores on Monday, you're going to lose tablet time for today because it's out of Johnny's mind already. He just moved on and didn't even think of it. It's best to pair it with that day. So for example, before bedtime, saying, Johnny, you didn't take out the garbage. We have that on the chart. And tomorrow you're going to lose tablet time. You're pairing it directly with the event. He mentioned this thing about having little subtle rewards or indicators of progress. He said the XP bar. XP means experience points. So for example, on the top of a screen, if someone is playing the video game and they do something, they're going to see the bar move, which means, oh, I just got more experience. Let me do that again. Oh, I just got more experience. So that's the programmer, the psychologist saying, you can even give these little subtle reinforcements throughout the game as opposed to larger rewards, like the character goes and opens a chest and gets lots of gold. So I hope that gives you an idea of how there is awareness of psychologically reinforcing a behavior, and that is one of the components that contributes to video game addiction. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that variable ratio interval reward schedule, as I presented a couple of slides ago, comes from B.F. Skinner, very well established as one of the strongest ways to get the reinforcement of the behavior. Rewarding frequently through minimal effort, and then also adding some uncertainty is kind of like playing the slot machines. I don't know if anybody's ever played the slot machines. I don't have a gambling addiction, but I did play one time. I think I lost $5, and I was like, what's the point? However, I would put a quarter in, nothing would happen. Another quarter in, nothing would happen. Probably $2 worth of quarters, and then I would win, but only 50 cents. And that gave me the false belief that, well, maybe if I play a little bit more, I'll actually win the big jackpot. So that reinforcement, kind of like a carrot on a stick, is also wired into video games. And it is very similar to some of the gambling algorithms in slot machines. One of the other things that contributes to habituation addiction is video games that have no end. Minecraft is a hugely popular game. It is what's called an open sandbox. You can do whatever with it. And because there is no actual end game, that contributes to it being very addictive. The other thing that comes into play is these massive multiplayer online games will have social interactions. One of the cultural pieces with video games is setting up a clan. And some of the clans are just friends. Some of the clans are actually structured, like we will meet at a certain time through the internet, and we will talk about the strategies that we're going to use, and we will have a commander. And then, so it's almost a regimented, almost military-like. So that way people can feel like, ooh, if I join the team, the clan, and we go and play somebody else, we're going to win. I wouldn't be surprised if some of the parents out there have heard things from their kids about, but I like playing video games because all of my friends are online. So that is a difficult place to go. We want to have kids who socialize. And if their only social outlet is video games, do we take it away if they're not doing their age-appropriate tasks? Or do we structure the video game time in order to allow other open time so that maybe they can do some in-person, real-time socializing? Socializing is very important for kids. So this is a quote from a video game programmer. So what makes video games addictive? The achievement system. I'm talking about the achievement that is put into every game. In the same way that, I don't know about you guys, but when I finish all of my medical records for the week and my desk is clear, I'm like, yes, I've achieved something. In the same way that when we get a like on Facebook, there's a little a little bit of dopamine. That is part of the achievement system. So when a kid is playing or an adult is playing and they learn how to beat the boss or go to the next level, that's a feeling of, I did it. I achieved something. And if kids or other folks focus on this, achieving through video games, because they're feeling like they don't have the ability or access or opportunities to achieve in their regular life, then this can become a substitute. Well, I'll talk about that a little bit more in a second. The ACE model is a way of understanding video games and how compelling, addictive they can be. Video games are very accessible. If you think about it right now, while you're looking at this presentation, how close to you is some kind of a device? Well, you're probably seeing this on a computer, but do you have a cell phone which is within 3 feet of where you are? Think about how many people have cell phones and how prominent they are. Excuse me, let me just take a little water here. So they're all over the place. Games and social media are immediately and readily accessible. Also a sense of control. There's immediate control. All I do is just hit a button, start playing a game, hit a button, do social media. I have connection and contact with other people. And excitement. It's interesting, it's exciting, it's distracting. If something is tedious or boring, then I can very easily get some quick excitement. One of the psychoanalysts that I know used the word electronic self-stimulation to describe video games. It's electronic, it's a device, and it is very self-stimulating. I'm not doing a job or a new hobby or talking with friends. I'm doing something that is self-stimulating. I'm stimulating myself. So now we're going to start talking about children and why it is that children are becoming very addictive, and what is it about children, the makeup of children, that draws them into becoming addicted to video games. Children play. If anyone has a kid who's gone to play therapy, that is a way which children process things. They're not fully mature, not fully developed, and there's not as much rational cognitive processing through. And so when a child is doing play therapy, they're actually taking their troubles and stressors and questions and through play, working it out. So playing video games and children being primarily play-based. Down at the bottom, play is a major arena where children express affect being feelings, and primary process material. Primary process meaning the things that are going on in the background that are not secondary, which are not like in the rational mind. Play is also very, very necessary for a child's social and cognitive development. In the animal world, you'll see tigers and other pups playing as a way of beginning to get ready for the hunt or food gathering. So play is a way of experimenting with what works and doesn't work in preparation for becoming an adult. Maturation doesn't really fully happen neurologically until later on. 18 is an arbitrary number. You know, someone is an adult at the age of 18. But if you actually look, there is still neurological connections that are being formed into the 20s and 30s, and some plateauing in early middle adulthood, 30s and 40s. When there is adolescence, and it's not just raging hormones, although that's sort of the go-to that we say, there's bone elongation, there's muscle mass changes, as well as neurological development. one of the psychologists called that phase neurological feathering. In other words, there's a lot more development of neurological connections. And then what has been found is the connections that are repetitively done, like getting up on time, exercising, doing study habits, the ones that are done repetitively get reinforced, and the ones that are not done just kind of metabolize away. So this leads to us being concerned about kids, especially teenagers, who are defaulting on a regular basis over and over to video games for fun, entertainment, self-stimulation, because during this phase, they're basically reinforcing that within themselves neurologically. Nerve cells that connect teenagers' frontal lobes with the rest of their brain are sluggish, and frontal lobes, prefrontal cortex is in charge of executive functioning, choice making. I wouldn't be surprised if you have heard of the term executive functioning. I'm going to lift my arm right now, and now I'm going to put it down. And that's executive functioning. It's like I am the executive of my body. And so there it is. There's the slide I'm looking for. If you look at the different scans over time, on the left, there's the brain scan, age 5. And then over to the right, there's age 20. The brighter, greener and yellow are less connected, less mature. And you can see how over time, from 5 through adolescence until 20, the development, maturation, and solidification of neurons happens from the back and low up and through to the front. So this area of executive functioning is not fully mature, not fully myelinated, like a myelination is like the outside of a cable, until much later. So this makes children very susceptible to wanting to play and defer from making choices which that they know are good for them in the long term. Or they might not know they're good for them in the long term. How many of you have had kids who say, why do I need to go to school? I'm not learning anything that I'm ever going to need to use in the future. That's a tough one. I still struggle with that when a kid says it. In my practice, I'm like, ooh, you know, you're kind of right. I don't know what to say that'll counter that. So looking at the larger for children, not just neurologically and developmentally, but other factors, there can be some environmental phenomenon which can create circumstances that can lead to video game addiction as a way of not having to deal with these external problems, lack of successful experiences. That goes back to what I was saying about video games being very excitable and controllable and accessible. If someone is feeling like, I studied really hard for the test and I got a D, and then there's the negative self-statements that a kid could say, oh, I'm such a loser, I'm stupid, but I know that I could go play video games and I'm a hero, I'm a champ. Low parental support and also low parental monitoring, high video game use by parents. Goes back to the old do what I say, not what I do phenomenon. So for example, back in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, when cigarettes were being smoked a lot more, a parent who was smoking a Pall Mall saying to his 13-year-old kid, I better not catch you smoking cigarettes. Well, you're not a good role model. Also, if there is a parent who is doing a lot of video game or screen use, and then telling the child, don't do a lot of video game playing, you're not doing good role modeling. Divorce or separation or any other stressors like medical problems, behavior problems at school, school phobia. We're also going to look at some other risk factors. If a child has anxiety, depression, other addictions, lack of social support, is just starting to go through figuring out. An unhappy teenager sounds a little judgmental. Let's put it in another context. A teenager who's pulling back and is trying to find himself, which is natural and developmental, but that person might default to the internet. Other risks have been found to be directly correlated through research. So internet addiction and ADHD, children who have ADHD can be prone to what's called hyperfocus. Hyperfocus, another word for that is getting into the zone. The very narrow screen and a lot of information that is being presented on video game screens is very stimulating, to the point where it almost acts like riddling. So a kid who has ADHD will play and lose track of time and not hear you when you're trying to call them for dinner. So I don't know if you've ever experienced this, calling your son, Johnny, 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 and Johnny has not heard you because he's so hyper-focused and has fallen into video game world. Internet addiction and hostility has been linked, internet addiction and depression. Once again, the fun, entertaining stimulation counteracts being depressed. Social phobia, if someone is afraid of going out, going into one's comfort zone and interacting online does not challenge them socially. So there's social connectedness through either video games or social media, but it's not as scary. It's not activating the anxiety. So if we put these all together, video games are designed to get you hooked. I still can't get over that word compelling as a synonym for addicting. Children who naturally play and are not fully developed, plus any environmental circumstances can lead to addiction. And I put question marks around that because there's some nuances to the idea of addiction. Let's get into that. Addiction is characterized by the inability to consistently abstain from the thing itself, impairment in behavioral control. Someone will do it obsessively and compulsively. There's a craving. In other words, if someone is not doing the addictive thing, there will be a physical phenomenon of, I just can't wait to go and do it. Diminished recognition of the problems. There's starting to be consequences in their life. And a dysfunctional emotional response, especially when the thing that they are addicted to is not available. Addiction does follow an obsessive compulsive kind of format. There will be the thought that pops up, that's the obsessing, and then the acting on it. So you'll see later when we talk more about the diagnostics of addiction, one of the pieces is, are you preoccupied? Do you think about it a lot? And so for some kids that I work with, when I ask that question, they say yes. They say yes, they are in school and thinking about, gosh, I can't wait to go home and play Minecraft. And so they're obsessing about it. And then once the bell rings, they're like out the door, home, put down the book bag, go right to their room and turn on Minecraft. So addiction is a state characterized by compulsive use, despite the adverse consequences. There's been some discussion and debate about the idea of a disease, the disease model, but we could understand it as dis-ease, which is suffering or impairment or challenges in someone's physical, social, vocational mood area. Our whole life, this is a quote from one of the 12-step programs. Our whole life and thinking was centered in drugs in one form or another. And you could substitute drugs with alcohol, gambling, or other addictions, sex addiction, et cetera, et cetera. And we lived to use and use to live. So folks who are addicted will find that their whole life and thinking is centered around doing the activity. This area right through here, the VTA, and some of these deeper structures are part of the reward system. and the reward system gets flooded with dopamine when the addictive behavior is pursued. And when the dopamine gets metabolized, there's a craving and a thought process of, I want to have that feeling again. Thought process obsessive, craving obsessive, and then, compulsive, and then someone who does it again and again. Unfortunately, that begins to develop a tolerance. Just as an FYI, looking at, this is a very interesting slide I came across a while ago, and it looks at the different types of behaviors and whether someone is leading more towards satiating through alcohol and food to become more down because they like that feeling versus someone who likes more of the up feeling, like video games, cocaine, amphetamines. So you can pause the presentation and look more at this. But it's a very interesting way of understanding why some people lead to one drug of choice or behavior of choice as opposed to another. Why do people do overeating as opposed to video gaming? Why do people do sex addiction as opposed to gambling? So it's just an interesting way of conceptualizing why this and not that. So this is the actual DSM-5 criterion, which has been changed. In the past, it was the DSM-4. Now we're doing the DSM-5. And I'm going to read to you some of the actual criterion. You see where my cursor is. Alcohol is often taken in larger amounts over a longer period of time, longer than it was intended. The next one down, persistent desire or unsuccessful effort to cut down or control. Great deal of time is spent in the activity or recovering from it, craving or a strong desire to use. Recurrent alcohol. Now, just remember, you can substitute alcohol for video games, internet, sex, gambling, food, and the same types of criterion are used to determine if someone has developed an addiction. Continued use of alcohol or video games despite having social interpersonal problems. Important social, occupational, recreational activities are given up. In other words, a kid starts to give up soccer or karate or band in order to do more video games. Here's an interesting one: recurrent alcohol use in situations in which it is physically hazardous or not allowed. So if a kid is playing video games on their screens at school, well, that means they've lost the ability to modulate their behavior, to say, no, I can't do it now. Tolerance, as defined by using it and needing it more and more and more to get the same feeling. So this is the actual legitimate DSM-5 alcohol use disorder criterion, and this format is modified for other types of addictions. So we talked about the DSM-5 criterion for alcohol, and in the DSM-5, the only behavioral diagnosis concerning addiction is gambling disorder. And if you note, there's the same types of criterion as alcohol use disorder. Needs to gamble or drink with increasing amounts, is restless or irritable when attempting to cut down on gambling or alcohol, often preoccupied, that's the obsessing, with doing gambling or how they can beat the odds, lies to conceal the extent of involvement with gambling. How many times have you guys had children who have lied about their video game use? Jeopardize significant relationships or educational careers. For kids, it's jeopardized family relationships or friends. So the DSM-5 has under an appendix conditions for further study, internet gaming disorder. And if you look at 1 through 9, you'll see that it is the same but adjusted and modified criterion. And I don't know if in the DSM-6, this will be an actual billable mental health diagnosis. We'll have to see how that pans out. There's other, expanding from just the video games, people who are studying computers, social media, have seen that there's other types of addictive activities: cyber sex addiction, which is pornography; cyber relationship addiction, which is people who are making relationships with unknown others. I've actually had some adults who have had cyber relationship problems where they got a lot of enjoyment talking online through social media. And then it got a little sketchy because the person would say, hey, I can't pay my rent. Can you send me some money? So this has led to several scams. Net compulsions such as online gambling, stock trading, or other types of compulsions. I actually had a client who lost several tens of thousands of dollars doing online gaming, online gambling. Information overload. Have you ever used the word, I fell down the rabbit hole, or heard someone say that they went down the rabbit hole because they're looking for information and they just keep going and going and going page to page to page and lose track of time? And then there's computer addiction, playing offline or online different video games. So these are some other disruptive behaviors which can become addictive that are not directly related to video games. So here's things to look for as parents, that if you want to just use some of these pieces of information to get a screening about your kid without necessarily having to go a full diagnostic criterion. If your child loses track of time when online, if they are sacrificing sleep to either text or play online, that's concerning. I've had many kids who've had screen difficulties talk about how they would stay up late. I don't know about you guys, but when I was younger, once again, I'm showing my age, when the lights went out, I would go under the covers with a flashlight to read a comic book. I was being sneaky and doing something fun. Nowadays, kids are doing it with their devices. And then the kid can't wake up in the morning and it's a big fight. If the child is falling asleep in school, isolating, going into their bedroom and closing the door, becomes agitated or angry when there's any attempt to structure or remove access to screens, repetitively checking for the phone, where's the phone, where's the phone, repetitively during dinner time, checking texts, spend time online in place of homework or chores. During the pandemic, when kids were doing virtual school, one of the recommendations that I gave to parents is to have the screen of the virtual school observable to the parents so the parents can monitor, because kids got really tricky. What they would do is they would turn on the Zoom or whatever the format was for the schooling, the class, and then they would change tabs and start watching YouTube videos. And then they wouldn't get the information from the class, and then they didn't do well on their assignments. So that is a reasonable intervention. It is what's called a structural intervention. You're changing the structure in order to keep eyes on whether or not the kid is drifting. And finally, prefers to spend time online rather than with friends or family. Other things to look for: disobeys time limits, and becomes argumentative and argues like a lawyer. One time I had a kid who came up with a brilliant thing. He said, well, I need more time playing video games because you're not accounting for the time that the computer was booting up or that the program was loading. And I was like, that's brilliant. That's really looking for those little technical pieces like a lawyer in order to get more time. Bargaining, I'll do my chores later. Becoming defensive, oh, come on, I just play for a little while. Lying about how much time that they spend. Here's a really good one. One time, one of the kids that I was working with was grounded from screens and went over to his friend's house and played video games at his friend's house. And then the mom found out and said, you knew you were grounded from screens. And the kid said, but you didn't say I couldn't play at someone else's house. And I had to give that kid credit. I was like, that's a good loophole. Parents being cautious about relationships that the kids develop online, because you don't know who these other kids are or what they're talking about, or even if they're adults pretending to be kids. Other things like seeming to be preoccupied. The classic is at the dinner table, where you could just see that they're eating very fast. And as soon as the fork goes down, can I go to my room? That's a concerning behavior. Losing interest in activities that were enjoyable at one time. There's a term called anhedonia, and hedonism. Hedonism, someone who likes a lot of pleasure. Anhedonia means someone who doesn't get pleasure. So if someone is losing interest or losing any enjoyment from other activities like church youth group, band, socializing with friends, sports, and all they're doing is defaulting and spending all of their spare time with video games, that is concerning. And then, of course, irritability, moodiness, and impairment in decision making. There are some physical effects: carpal tunnel syndrome, dry eyes, eye strain, wandering eyes, backaches, especially if someone is hunched over, neck aches. During the pandemic, Zoom fatigue was noted, and there were recommendations for getting a good posture and actually getting up and walking around during the day, so that way someone did not just fall into a bad posture, which would lead to backaches, muscle aches. Sleep disturbances, and weight gain. So I don't know if any of you have seen weight gain with the sedentary activity of video games in your kids, but it is a real issue. Have you ever heard this from your child or another child? When I grow up, I want to be a video game tester, because then you get to play video games all day long. It could also become a fantasy of, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. I actually talked to a video game tester, a beta tester, and it's not as fun as you would think. So the reality is there's a lot of coding and technical, tedious activity. So it's really not as fun as someone might think. In the picture, you see the chair, which actually moves with the screen. It gives you a three-dimensional sort of experience, and the screen is huge and immersing. There are a number of video game chairs that even have speakers right next to your head, so that it becomes a really immersive experience. I don't know how many thousands of dollars that chair is. And on the bottom, that's a video game testing format. Remember, I mentioned those internet cafes and video game cafes. That's kind of what they look like, except they actually have cubicles, and you get your own video game screen, and you pay as long as you want and stay as long as you want. So this is the internet addiction test developed by a woman she's passed away now, but she did some really great work. I believe she even had a specialized program in a rehab in Pennsylvania, Dr. Kimberly Young. She took the diagnostic criterion for other addictions and applied it to internet or video gaming. So if you want to go online and download it, feel free to. It's free. There's 8 questions, and I actually will use this when doing an initial evaluation of a kid. Say yes or no. Do you feel preoccupied with the internet or video games? Yes or no. Do you feel the need to use video games with increasing amounts of time? And you'll note that it's all the same or similar criterion as alcohol use disorder and gambling addiction. Just a quick commentary about violent games. That has been a concern and an issue. If a child or someone is playing Call of Duty or violent games, will they become more at risk for actually translating fantasy into reality? One of the pluses is that once somebody stops playing the video games, the areas of the brain that are activated because of that aggression and adrenaline actually go back to their normal state. So I wanted to mention that I have seen that within 2 to 3 days of structuring and limiting video game addiction, most kids actually settle into a more normal way of operating. So that first 2 or 3 days, maybe up to a 5-day week, could be a little bit of a withdrawal. Not a full-blown withdrawal with seizures, but just a, what am I going to do with my time? How do I adjust? How do I transition from the default of video games to this new, I need to do my homework and I only get an hour of video time? So there's going to be a transition once you put structures in place. But the good thing is, the take home from this is that more normative experiences can be achieved. One of the biggest things that I recommend is removing the electronic self-stimulatory distracting electronics from the child's bedroom. If a kid has a laptop or a tablet or a cell phone or a desktop computer in their room, you're doomed. They will go to their room, close the door, and you're done. You're going to need the jaws of life from the fire department to get them out of the room. Once again, it's a structural recommendation that I have for making the screens easy to monitor by the parents, so that way you know how long they're on and what they're looking at. This is supported by a pediatrician who recommended do not put a computer in your child's room. It should be in a common area. Other interventions are turning in the cell phone before going to sleep, turning in the tablets to be charged in the parents' room before going to sleep. Problems come into play if it becomes an actual physical power struggle. Give me the phone. No, give me the phone. It's my phone. I want it. And then the kid refuses to do it. And then there's a physical power struggle with the tablet or the cell phone. In order to avoid that, once the phones are taken away, I highly recommend parent controls. I am not sponsored by Circle, which is one of the parent controls, but it's an excellent device which structures the time on the internet, and each child has their own account, and it is totally controlled by the parents. In other words, if you have a younger kid, they might have access from 6:30 p.m. to 7:30 p.m., and then it goes to desktop. It just shuts down. An older kid, 15, 16, might have access from 6:30 to 8:30, and then it shuts down. The good thing about having parent controls is you set it up and there's no power struggle. It's just the way it is. So I strongly encourage parents to use parent controls. Google even has ways of structuring time, and there's other types of parent controls. Even on Xbox and stuff, you could set up some timing mechanisms, so that way once you set it up, that's the way it is, and there's no get off now, give me 5 minutes, get off now. No. All right, so the goal is to have the structure without the power struggle. Tantrum versus meltdown. The difference is, if you look at This one, child checks to make sure that you're paying attention to the behavior. If the child is actually having the distress in a way that lets you know I am distressed, it's more of a tantrum. And one of the big indicators of it being a tantrum is once the child gets what they want, the behavior will end. I don't want to play video games. I don't want to play video games. I'm so mean. Okay, you can play video games. Thanks, Mom. Whoa, wow. That wasn't a meltdown. That wasn't some kid being distressed, anxious, depressed, and emotionally dysregulated. That was a kid who was amplifying what they were doing in order to get what they want. So feel free to look at this, to stop the presentation and look at this a little bit more in order to get an understanding of, are we dealing with manipulation here, or is the kid really emotionally dysregulated? So here's some other take homes. What you can do: talk to your child about their use, limit the amount of time through structural mechanisms. If the child is not able to do it themselves, and if verbal prompts lead to arguing and sneaking and lying, then go to the next level of having parent controls. Setting a password for the computer so that only you can log in. That's a structural intervention. Make opportunities for other interests and social activities so that video games don't just become the default. Earning computer time, that's a big one. When you get your age-appropriate household tasks completed and your homework is done, then you will receive the reward. I try to tell the kids that I work with, I am subject to the same rules of cause and effect as you are. If I don't do my job, I don't get my paycheck. If I don't do my job, my boss might give me a finger wagging, or I might get written up. The same for you. If you don't do your homework, then you don't get the fun, the tablet time. If you don't do your homework, then the teacher gives you a finger wagging and gives you a bad grade. The cause and effect is the same. We're not different as adults. It's just a different activities. Setting the time, see if they're able to stick with it. If they can't control their time on the computer, using a timer, an external timer. If a kid does fall into the hyper focus and the zone, having an external prompt, ding, 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 1 hour is up, is necessary, because they will start to fall into la la land. Once the timer goes off, the child can get off the computer. Buy or download a program that restricts computer use. Windows 7, wow, that's how old this presentation is. We're up to Windows 11 now, right? Some other things to watch out for. You probably have experienced these if you have a kid who is falling into the rabbit hole of video game addiction, arguing just 5 more minutes, let me save the game, wait until the next checkpoint. I've even had kids who have gone into their parents' rooms when the parents were not there in order to try and take back the devices. So doing things like taking the game controllers, the power cords, if things become problematic and it becomes a cat and mouse game, you put an intervention in place, they find a way to get around it. You could always lock some of the power cords or game controllers in your car or bring them to your office. Let's hope it doesn't get to that point, because then it becomes a unhappy, sneaky kid, suspicious parent dynamic, and then everybody's miserable. Also be aware of enabling your kid, covering for them when they miss school, doing their homework in order to avoid bad grades. Oh, I'll just do it myself. It's just such a big fight. Allowing meals to be eaten while in front of a computer, dismissing or ignoring deteriorating grades, taking care of the child's responsibilities. Once again, that's I'll just take the garbage out myself, because it's going to be too much of an argument to try and get them to come down from their room where they're playing games. So you are enabling and covering for them. There are times when kids will be more at risk. Oh, I should be wrapping up soon. Immediately upon returning from school, immediately after dinner, on weekends. So these are the periods of time when kids will be at risk for running to the room, closing the door, and going into device world. These are some general time frames. 7-year-old, 1.5 hours of play on Saturday and Sunday. 15-year-olds can be allowed a little bit more. I respect a family's decision to structure things the way that they want. I even respect the families that say there are no electronics other than for school. There are no games during the school week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Sunday. I fully support that, and only video games are used on weekends as a reward if everything else is taken care of. I do not recommend anything more than 2 hours a day. There's a great study that I came across where a pediatric psychologist looked at mood, academics, social, self-care metrics, and how these were affected by video game use. And this psychologist found out that somewhere around after 2 hours, all of a sudden these metrics started going down. There's something about being able to play games from 0 to 1 hour or 0 to 2 hours where there's not much of an impact, but after 2 hours a day, then mood becomes affected. Socializing becomes affected. They're not socializing with the family as much. Academics become affected. So even though there might be some slight differences of whether it's a half hour, 1 hour, the cutoff that I strongly recommend is no more than 2 hours a day. And that's based upon the clinical information at our disposal. Cognitive behavioral therapy, CBTIA, can be used for children. I apply some of these interventions with the kids if they are willing to modulate themselves. I'm a big fan of kids being able to say, yes, I need to address this, and I will learn the coping skills. If they're not able to do it on their own, then the structural interventions by the parents are needed. Motivational interviewing is a strategy which is used to try to encourage someone from moving from one habit to another. And it goes from pre-contemplation, I'm thinking about it, to contemplation, I'm thinking about it, to preparation, what am I actually going to do, to action, implementing a plan, and then finding out, is the plan working? So these are strategies to help develop new behaviors and adjust from old, unproductive behaviors to new, more productive, more healthy behaviors. That period of time, 2, 3, 4, 5 days of withdrawal, there will be a sense of loss when someone is moving from one behavior which is common and familiar, something that someone looks forward to and is the default, to, well, I don't have it anymore, I'm doing other more healthy behaviors. There's going to be a sense of loss, and there's going to be some grieving with that. So be prepared to have a moody kid for a couple of days when you structure the video games. I had somebody make a comment to me when I presented this. How can you have an online Gamers Anonymous if video gaming is the problem? It didn't make sense that someone would use electronics to actually solve an electronic problem, but it's out there. If someone is medically distressed and having a hard time with letting go of the behavior, there are medical interventions. Bupropion, otherwise known as Wellbutrin, has been found to help with reducing addictive behaviors. Wellbutrin is used with smoking cessation, and it's also used with learning with someone getting a reduction of craving for alcohol and opiates. Other medications are available if you've tried everything. The kid has tried counseling, you've tried structural interventions, and nothing is coming to the fore. There's no change. the medical intervention is a last line. So I know that I spoke quickly, and yeah, just about at an hour. I want to thank once again Julie and Stephen for giving me this opportunity to present this. There's my email at the bottom there, and it'll be forwarded to me, and I'll answer any questions if you have any. But I want to thank you for attending this presentation, and I hope you have a great rest of the day. Take care.